All right, welcome, welcome. My name is Chris Riles. I am the anti-hunger advocate here at Tennessee Justice Center. Um, Glad to have you all here this afternoon. Um, yeah, thanks a lot. So introductions, like I said, my name is Chris. I will be facilitating this webinar today. These are the rest of our nutrition/anti-hunger staff. Several of us are on here today, so you'll see us talking and having conversation. A little bit about TJC's anti-hunger advocacy. So our goal is to end hunger in Tennessee by protecting and strengthening federal nutrition programs, which are SNAP, WIC, and the child nutrition programs. We do a lot of different things to make this happen. Largely, it's direct client work, advocacy, and litigation, and some broad strokes. These are just some of the programs that we work with. This is not an exhaustive list, so if you have any questions about other programs, let us know. So today we're going to be talking about a few things. So we're going to go over our objectives and what we want to learn from today. We're going to talk about some data at the state and federal levels having to do with exiting prison. We are going to discuss what recidivism is and how it works. Then we're going to talk about SNAP and some of the things that intersect with this community. We're going to give a couple of our lovely partners some time to talk about their experiences in this work. We're going to talk about advocacy and action opportunities for you, and then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion time. So for objectives, we are wanting to learn about the intersection of hunger and individuals exiting the prison and jail system. And we also want to discuss recidivism and hunger, how they intersect. We want to understand SNAP for currently and formerly incarcerated applicants. And then we also want to learn opportunities for ways to advocate. So first, we're going to go over a little bit of terminology. You will hear us interchangeably use these orange terms: formerly incarcerated, justice impacted or involved, people exiting prison and jail, returning citizens, system impacted, and reentering individuals. We're not going to use terms like offender, convict, felon, or inmate because those have a value judgment attached to them and that we don't want to perpetuate. So let's talk about hunger and reentry. So the first 2 weeks of release have the highest risk of death. And that's a really important thing to remember when we talk about people exiting the prison and jail system. Hunger specifically exacerbates other issues, which makes it a lot more difficult to secure things like housing, employment, and just generally other basic needs. And to that end, SNAP is the most effective program in the United States for combating hunger, just generally across the board. That is a stat we give pretty often. So let's look at some federal data around people exiting prison and hunger. So in America, as of the 2022 U.S. Department of Justice report, there were 1.2 million Americans in prison, which is the third highest rate of incarceration in the world. 20% of those people, formerly incarcerated people, experienced food insecurity in 2019. It's a huge number. Of that, Black people are incarcerated at 4.2 times the rate of white people, and Latino people are incarcerated at 2 times the rate of white people. And also, if you haven't ever seen the Sentencing Project website, they do a really good job with some of this data. So as far as Tennessee goes, 817 people per 100,000 people in Tennessee are in prison. This is a very large number. That equates to about a $1.3 billion operating budget just in Tennessee alone. We have 11,671 individuals released from prison in 2021. However, only 1,208 of those people applied for SNAP prior to release in 2021. We'll talk a little bit more about the pre-release waiver and how that works in a few slides later on. But just know that that's less than 10%. It's about 10%. And here's just a visual version of this data. As you can see, the rate of incarceration is much higher than the general United States population. which is much higher than any other country in the world, at least any other country on this graph. So next I'm going to hand it over to Lydia. Lydia West is one of our lovely nutrition advocacy interns here at Tennessee Justice Center. She was very integral to helping to put together the data for this PowerPoint. So I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to her. And Lydia, just let me know when to go to the next slides, okay?
Sounds great. Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Lydia West. I am a rising senior at Pitzer College in California, and I'm a Nashville native. I've been really having a great experience interning at Tennessee Justice Center this summer and have had the chance to work on this webinar alongside Chris. So today I'm particularly going to be talking about recidivism. So recidivism is a term that we use a lot when discussing prison and reentry in the carceral system in general. So recidivism is the tendency of a previously incarcerated individual to be rearrested, reconvicted, or reincarcerated. So in a nutshell, recidivism is when somebody re-enters the system after exiting it. A main thing that leads to recidivism rates being particularly high in the United States is that people who are exiting prison are not having their basic human needs met. So this would be things such as access to food, healthcare, housing, etc. So when those basic human needs aren't met, people are going to find extra legal options in order to meet those basic human needs. And in turn, this often leads to these higher rates of recidivism. Chris, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So, okay. So 82% of people released from state prison have been seen to be rearrested within 10 years of their release date. So this is a study done by the Bureau of Justice. And as you can see on the bottom here, this graph shows that this recidivism rate decreases each year someone stays out of prison. So that highest rate of recidivism when someone is most vulnerable to being rearrested or reconvicted is that first year of release. So we hope to focus on the people who are initially exiting prison, because if we can kind of target that first year of release in which someone is most vulnerable, we will see that amount of recidivism, that rate decrease. As you can see, it's consistently going down for each year, but the biggest jump there is between the first year and the second year. So if we can do our part to make that recidivism rate lower in the first year, it will have kind of a trickle effect and rates will consistently be lower. So this was a study done between 2008 and 2018. Like Chris mentioned, we've got lots of great sources that you can read into afterwards. And I will pass it back on to Chris. I did want to mention one more thing. If we are able to decrease these recidivism rates, then we could see an operating budget of the TDOC decreasing. So as Chris mentioned, the TDOC's operating budget is $1.3 billion, which is a very high amount. And if we're having people re-enter the system after exiting, that is something that we could focus on to then decrease the amount of people who are currently incarcerated in our state and possibly decrease the amount of funding needed by that particular department.
That is an excellent point, Lydia. Thank you so much. I also wanted to point out that we will be sending these slides out afterwards with our follow-up email. If you have any questions or would like to ask something or state something, feel free to come off of mute, raise your hand with the raise hand function, put it in the chat. We like these to be a little more informal and engaged, so please speak up. So next we're going to talk about SNAP, which was formerly known as food stamps. A lot of people still call it food stamps. It's just something people know it as. It allows people to buy food with what's called an EBT, or electronic benefits transfer card, at stores and farmers markets that participate. It's very similar to a debit card. It helps to mitigate hunger for low-income families of all demographics. However, we're going to talk about how specifically it helps these populations who are exiting prison and jail. So a few things to know about SNAP when it comes to this population. SNAP is administered by the household. So a case is considered a household, not an individual. This can cause a few issues when it comes to determining eligibility for this population, simply because they may live in a situation where they live with other people who should be on separate cases. They may live in group homes. They may not have a home to live in. So these are things that could cause issues. DHS caseworkers might be confused about multiple individuals in the same address, for instance, in transitional housing or other places where people live communally. That being said, applicants may not also know where they will live when they're applying before release, which can also cause another issue with where the card gets sent or how the benefits work or what the amount is. Another barrier to access is navigating the process, especially when working to do an application um, before release, which we'll talk about the pre-release waivers soon. Um, and there are some people who, when they leave the prison or jail system, they become unhoused, which can also be a barrier to knowing where to send the card. Assisting agencies or family friends or even the DHS office are places that a card can be sent, but you have to know that that's a fact. So hopefully we can educate people about where to send their cards. Another barrier that can happen when navigating this process while still incarcerated is having access to the necessary verification documents like IDs, residence, and income statements. A lot of these are required for your SNAP application. And of course, if you don't have these documents, it can be a little tricky. Oftentimes there are ways around this, but just know that if you're helping people navigate this process, these could become barriers. Another issue that happens sometimes is that people will be incarcerated here in Tennessee, but they will exit the system and move to either their home state or another state where they're from. And this can cause delays in access because you have to reside in a state that you apply in, meaning essentially the pre-release process isn't going to work very well for you. So these are just all things to keep in mind. Um, as well, just about the verification documents, there's a thing called self-attestation. This is when you essentially write a letter or you have somebody write a letter on your behalf to DHS saying, you know, I don't have access to this document. I don't have a lease. I don't have these things. Here's myself. I attest that this is true. It's a last resort. They won't honor it unless they've tried everything else, but it is an option. Um, and also when people do leave prisons or jails here and they are going to other states, it's worth contacting the state to understand what the options are. You never know until you ask, right? So those are things to be really cognizant of when helping people in this process. Assisting agencies can help. Giving an agency what's called an authorized representative permission is very integral to this process. Basically, it lets them speak on your behalf and access your files, view your case, and in some cases, you can even do the interview, the necessary interview on behalf of the applicant. Here at TJC, we do this pretty often, being authorized representatives for people. It just makes it easier. You know, it allows you to log into the portal and file documents and things like that for them. So this is a way that agencies can help people who are navigating this process. So now we're going to talk about this pre-release waiver. So Tennessee has a waiver for pre-release applications, which essentially means that a person who is slated for release within the next 30 days may start the application process with the goal of having a card in hand with benefits loaded onto it on day one. This is the goal of this program. This waiver expires in 2025, but they often renew it. And the issue of this with the pre-release waiver is that, of course, it must be done while they're still incarcerated, meaning that a lack of access to things like phones, computers can be a barrier to filing this application, simply because most of the process has been pushed to an online portal or over the phone, which if you don't have access to either one of those infrastructures, you can't do it. So they rely heavily on reentry caseworkers and people coming into the prisons and jails to help with this process. As we said earlier, in 2021, only 1,208 people applied while incarcerated, versus the 11,671 people who were released from prison that year. So this is a very stark difference in people applying versus people released. Another thing we should really mention in this conversation is the drug felony ban. So essentially 20% of fiscal year 21 prison population had drug related offenses. And in Tennessee, we have what's called a partial drug felony ban, where the only thing that will preclude somebody in this regard from the SNAP program is having a Class A drug felony. If you have a Class B through E drug felony, this can be overcome by completing qualifying rehab programs. Now, there are some issues with this that can be problematic is if you cannot produce this documentation, one of the things we see in this regard is that, you know, a person might have gone through a rehab program 20 years ago, and the facility that they went to either no longer exists or no longer has their documents, or, you know, a number of things can happen. And so that can be a barrier. Another issue could be, you know, if you have a Class A drug felony that does not include, or I'm sorry, if you have a Class B through E drug felony that does not include usage, it doesn't really make much sense to require them to go through rehab. So you can get a doctor to submit a you know, formal letter saying this person, you know, has no needs for addiction or drug rehabilitation. And like I said earlier, self-attestation can be used as a last resort. Should a person not be able to meet any of the other requirements for this, they can file a self-attestation saying that, you know, I did complete the drug rehab program. This was the date. This is when it happened. Here's the results. So just keep that in mind. And the caseworkers at DHS should be able to assist people with finding these documents. Like I said, self-attestation is a last resort. Another thing to remember is that 25 states and territories in the United States have partial or full drug felony bans. I believe there's only one state that has a full drug felony ban. And Lydia, I don't know if you remember which one it is.
It's South Carolina.
South Carolina, yeah. The rest of these 24 states are partials, and these are adjudicated by the states. They choose how it works in each state. But that means that the rest of the states and territories have done away with this altogether, and we would love to see either a federal removal of this rule or a state removal of this rule, whichever we can get. In this regard, a partial ban can actually be worse than a full ban, because, you know, not only can, you know, locating documents be an issue, like we said earlier, especially if you don't have access to those documents anymore, but understanding the rules can be a real barrier. I know that personally, when I've done in-reach work inside of prisons, a lot of the people that I talked to thought that just having any drug felony was a barrier to SNAP, and a lot of them didn't understand that, oh, you know, if you've got a Class C, I can still get on it, you know. And so education is a really big tool here. Another problem is that people don't always know exactly what their class is. And so a person may not know if they have a Class A or a Class something else. And another issue here is what we talked about, the blanket rule. It doesn't account for the fact that a drug felony ban doesn't necessarily mean usage. And so if a person doesn't have a usage charge, they're still subject to these rules and must kind of overcome them in the way that we mentioned earlier. So all things to keep in mind. There is some new legislation that affects this that happened this previous General Assembly, actually. This is HB 1886, SB 2078. This bill this law did a lot of things for public assistance programs. The one specific to this, though, is it codified that any felony that happens in another state that would categorize as a Class A drug felony in Tennessee now applies for the SNAP ban if that person moves to Tennessee after their felony conviction. This was not the case before necessarily, and so now this is going to block a large number of people who would otherwise be eligible and are not now. So this is a bill that happened this year. We're also going to talk about time limits because these can be a barrier not just for this population but for everyone. But specifically for this population, they can be often very bad. So you'll also hear this called work requirements, generally in government settings. The way this works is that there are a lot of people who fall into this category who are subject to work requirements and time limits where if they are not working 20 hours a week or 80 hours a month, they only have 3 months out of a 36-month calendar that they can receive benefits before they're knocked off. This calendar is an objective calendar and resets every 3 years, and it resets this coming January in 2025. So if a person is unable to meet work requirements, they can have up to 3 months of benefits. This can be a huge problem for people who are exiting prison and jail because they are unemployed at 3 times the rate of the general public. But for people of color and non-white people, this is almost 7 times higher. This is an issue because on top of that, there are a lot of employees who simply will not hire people who have been convicted in the past. And this can be a huge reason that there's such a high unemployment or underemployment rate. And one thing we don't always think about is the fact that just because somebody has a job doesn't mean they're able to get the number of hours necessary to meet these SNAP requirements. And that's a really important thing to remember. So all of this works together to effectively keep people from accessing benefits. And as we talked about earlier, but hunger is a huge barrier to meeting other needs. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Cleopatra, who is the admissions manager at Dismiss House here in Nashville. She's going to tell us a little bit about her experience. I'm going to go off mute and let her talk.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for the great data. I feel like that was some stuff maybe I didn't know. So everything that they just presented on is very true, based on what I see here at Dismiss House. For those who are not aware, Dismiss House is a residential reentry program here in Nashville, Tennessee, serving men coming out of Tennessee state prisons and jails. So we take men from all the prisons and a few jails, but mostly the prisons. What I see, since I'm the admissions manager, I process all the applications as well as working with the guys when they initially come in. And I would say there's only one prison who is currently doing the SNAP applications beforehand, and that's Bledsoe. So shout out to Bledsoe. Pretty much every guy that comes from Bledsoe prison has a SNAP application completed. They've already done their interview. So their card probably will arrive within like a week or two of them being here. It's rare that any other prison processes it before then. I know that Bledsoe has a dedicated SNAP person, or they used to at least have a dedicated SNAP person working with them on scheduling all the interviews, which only makes sense. This person that was their job to coordinate it with the reentry counselors to do the applications and schedule the phone interviews. I know that the reason the other prisons probably are not as good as it is because of staffing. Because one of the counselors was talking to me at Bledsoe, who's not there anymore, but she would tell me like, okay, I have 50 SNAP interviews to do today or something like that. Like something that's pretty unrealistic. So it seems like every prison just kind of needs a designated SNAP person. Because of course, when they do get here, there are some issues. Even if they did do the application, they'll send a letter saying you missed your phone interview. Well, it's because they were incarcerated. So that happens a lot. So honestly, the only thing I can tell them to do is just call early in the morning, first thing in the morning. And, they're on hold from anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours. I've had a guy come up to me and show me the phone. It's like at 2 hours and 15 minutes. So luckily they do have time to do that number program. Not everyone does, but sometimes they do in the early days since they're not working. But if they do not have a SNAP application done, we do the application. I actually help them apply for it on our laptop. So we do the application together. And it takes quite a while because you have to have a phone number and an email address. And only a certain amount of them are coming out with that, meaning like if their family picks them up or a friend picks them up and gets them a phone. So if they do not, then we have to wait. We have to wait till we get them a phone and get the phone set up. And that sometimes is a convoluted process. So if they have a phone and an email address, I'll try to do it within the same day they get there or the day after, so it kind of move the process. But they're probably not getting approved and actually having a SNAP card. I say probably a month and a half after arriving, 2 months usually. So that's the experience here. Approvals, most guys get approved. In fact, even while you were talking, I was thinking, actually, we want to start tracking this to see how many guys, what each guy, do they have the application done before they come, or do we have to do it for them? So I'm going to write a note to have us track that in our data system that we use so we can really see what the numbers are. Because I have an idea. It's like I said, it's only one prison who's getting it done, um, unfortunately. But like I said, most people do get approved because honestly, most of the men here in similar situations, they're formerly incarcerated, they're not working, and they are responsible for providing the majority of their food here at Dismas House. So the approvals aren't too hard to get once to get the application done once DHS processes it. We've had a few where we send in the proof of residency, they tell us they have all the documents that they need. But then it's just a waiting game, and it could be that the car got lost in the mail, no telling. But it would be great if every prison was able to have a designated SNAP person to help them apply, and they get the card like within a few days of them being here, because just having that, some guys are coming out with literally like $0 and having just something to go buy yourself some food, that dignity that comes with that, is crucial, and they're always asking about it and things like that. So that's pretty much my experience. I can answer any questions.
Yeah, I've got a question. Do you think, in your professional opinion, that the issue with the pre-release waiver and being actually used as an under-resourcing?
What'd you say? I couldn't hear that.
Sorry. Do you think that the issue is that the prison system simply doesn't have enough resources to help people do
Yes,
this?
I think that's exactly what it is, because I mean, most of the prisons, especially the core civic prisons, they just do not have enough reentry counselors to do that reentry work. Um, I mean, a lot of the guys, they're not even coming out with IDs, let alone, which is, equally as crucial as a SNAP card. So definitely just lack of staff and someone whose designated job that is, because I don't know who that is assigned to, like, who does that fall under? Is that the reentry counselor? Is that a case manager? Is that a institutional parole officer? I don't know if that's assigned to anybody specifically to get that done. And it's something, like I said, something I think I would like to see us start tracking. Like I said, only one prison is consistent with it.
Right.
And certainly no jails, certainly no jails.
Yeah. And Kaylee, I see your question. I'm gonna ask another question and then we'll get to yours. I was curious how often you see the 7-day expedited process happening. For context, for everybody else watching, if certain populations qualify for a 7-day expedited process when they apply, generally speaking, it has to do with having very, very low income and cash on hand. Um, do you ever see this, Cleopatra? Do you ever see the application happening, the approval and the card in hand ever happening within 7 days?
Including the card?
Yes.
No. I would say early on when I started in 2020. I want to say 2020, like early 2020, 2021, it was moving so fast. Like, because it got to the point where we would do the application on the laptop, and I was telling them they might call you today or tomorrow. They were calling them like day of, doing the interview, getting stuff out like immediate. That hasn't been the case for a few years. So no, I'm not, for a few years have I seen that 7-day thing. Yeah, there's usually
Right.
probably taking them at least a week to call them for the phone interview.
Right. Right. Kaylee Shepard with Second Harvest asks, what can we do to connect with the prisons to maybe help bridge the gap so they can have a designated staff person? I don't know if you have an answer for this, Cleopatra, but
You know, probably just start kind of just being on them a lot more. If someone does have a program, us and other programs, if they know someone is coming, asking if they've applied for SNAP. I think I did ask one counselor, and they was like, "No, we don't do that." Like that, she literally said, we don't do that." Like, no, they haven't, but you can, I said, "Okay, well, don't worry, we'll definitely get it when they get here." Um, but I would say just staying on top of TDOC and figuring out whose responsibility is this waiver? Like, who is that assigned to?
Yeah.
That's exactly the issue I've been running into, Cleopatra, is like finding who these folks are. I feel like all the information is siloed.
Yep.
It's like, do we need to reach out to like the director of Department of Correct? Like, who is it falling on?
Probably, honestly, the person I'm thinking of that would be a good person to reach out to is Victoria Ritchie. She is I can't remember exact. I think she's pretty much over reentry of all the prisons though. She's over reentry. So she would probably be the first person I can think of that would be able to have some type of knowledge or steer us in the right direction.
And Katie, I can send you her information actually after this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We have access. We have a connection to her. Susan, I see your comment here. And what's frustrating is the free Lifeline phones are often contingent on receiving SNAP benefits.
Exactly. So then they can't get that
Yes.
phone. Exactly.
But
Yeah.
also, it is worth noting that the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program that was funding those phones has actually lapsed.
Yes,
So
I did hear that. Yes.
yeah, so all of the internet and phone services that were provided by that program no longer are applicable. So that's just adding extra barriers. So yeah, that's a really good point. We see that situation when it comes to unhoused people as well, where they can't get SNAP because they can't apply over the phone, but they also can't get a phone because they don't have SNAP. So yeah, it is kind of recursive in that regard. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm gonna hold a little bit of space. Okay. Well, if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll respond to them. Thank you so much, Cleopatra. We really
welcome.
appreciate
Thank
you
you.
giving your insight and kind of what it's like on the ground doing this. So I will CC Cleopatra on the follow-up email. So if you need anything from her, you can reach out directly. Okay. Thanks. We were going to have Dr. Cynthia Stewart on. Oh, she just got here. Awesome. Hi, Cynthia. Perfect timing. So we actually just got to the slide where you will start speaking. So thank you. I'll go on mute and let you speak.
Hello.
Hello.
I can't hear.
Oh, can you hear?
Yeah.
Testing.
Hey.
Awesome. The floor is yours.
The floor is mine. Sorry, I am late coming in, everyone. I had a resident issue arise, and yeah, we all know how these things happen.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
So tell me what we've been talking about generally, what you would like just to talk about how our people deal with their food insecurity.
Yeah, so far we've given some data and some kind of barriers to the SNAP program access for these populations. Cleopatra over at Dismas House just kind of gave an outline of what her experience is with the program and how they navigate it. And so, yeah, just anything you want to share about that would be great, about what your experience is dealing with these issues.
Okay, so I wish I had heard what Cleopatra said, because I imagine that we talk about a lot of the same things. Our people come in and have a great deal of food insecurity because they do not have any funds and they don't have any job, right? So as they walk in the door, they are wondering how to make everything happen. We do not provide food here at TPOM. We do help people with the needs that they have. So one of the first things we do is take people to sign them up for a food box that should get them through a couple of weeks. But for some of our people, that is all that's needed. By the time they are out of that food box, they are doing well and are able to purchase food on their own. A number of our people, though, are still not employed by the time the food is running out. We keep a small food pantry here that is stocked by volunteers. So we never know what is going to be in there and what isn't, but that has become a mainstay for our residents. We only implemented that about a year ago, but as you know, food prices have gone up so much that that it really started being much more of a difficulty for our people than it previously had been. We see that there is a lot of food sharing among our people, which is a wonderful thing, right? That people are taking care of each other. The difficulty, of course, is that that is even needed. Um, when people So that is really the experience that people generally have through our program. People who have not signed up for SNAP benefits, who didn't have that opportunity prior to leaving incarceration, one of the first things we do is help them to get their SNAP benefits going. But with the difficulties in the SNAP program lately, um, that has also been problematic with people not receiving the phone call that they have to have in order to get the benefits started. Um, something being set up and then not being continued, or taking forever for the benefits card to come in. So we've seen just a lot more delay, I would say, in the last year for people getting their SNAP benefits, and that is causing more difficulties for them as they are navigating the program. The last thing that we want people to really have to worry about as they are working through trying to find a job and becoming accustomed to a free society and navigating the bust system is, am I going to have enough to eat, right, tonight? And yet that is, as I'm saying, an increasing issue for people.
Yeah, those are all really good points. I guess one of the things that Cleopatra talked about was kind of the timeline of the process whenever she's helping people with this issue. Can you speak to a little bit about what your experience is with like the submitting the application to getting the card, and how any barriers you notice in that process?
Sure. So many people do come to us with the application already submitted. If they're in a prison that has a really good reentry counselor, they might have started that process. And in that case, we've seen the card come in within like a week of them arriving. So that's really fantastic. Much more commonly, people come in and need to go through the process, and our case managers help them to register. And it used to be that once they registered, we would see the card coming in. They would be able to have their interview and the card coming in within 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks. Now, that again has gotten stretched out, and we have seen cards not coming in for a solid month. Um, and that's of course a grave difficulty. And part of that also goes back to what I was saying, where an interview call would be set up and then never received. So then our people have to get back. They have to call at that point and try to reschedule the interview that they were waiting for. And I've seen people be on hold and trying to navigate that particular part of the system for 3 hours. And
Yeah, that
yeah.
mirrors kind of what Cleopatra was saying as well. It also mirrors what we see generally across populations.
Mhm.
So yes, Sherry said our SNAP program experienced huge delays, including people being dropped from the program because of the upgrade of the state's computer system. It's been a mess. Yes, during the transition from the accident system to the EBMS system and DHS, we saw hundreds of thousands of people be dropped from the program. We're only just now getting up to something resembling a normal number of applicants and participants. We hope to see it getting better as the days go on. And then Susan says, my clients have had a faster turnaround when they take the physical application directly to the office rather than the online application. Susan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you would like to come off of mute and talk about a little more about your experience with that, and whether transportation is an issue or documentation.
I think a lot of the challenges that we've had is my clients either they don't have a telephone. So now at my agency and my reentry program, I'm able to gift them a $50 Kroger card to get them started as they're kind of getting adjusted with the reentry world. But that only lasts, not very long. So one of the things we were trying to do is go online and establish an application, but either they may not have an established email, or they don't have a telephone, or they feel like they might get lost in the system. They don't trust the computer system. So now, far from my office is the actual DHS office for Knoxville, Tennessee, and I've just seen better results. Like, it just seems to go faster for the individuals who go over, and then they're immediately assigned an appointment, a telephone appointment, and they can physically hand the application and the documentation that we've pulled together in person. Now, it's still not 100%, and they still get letters, "Oh, you missed your appointment," even though they didn't. They're carrying their phones in their program. Like, they need to get permission to carry their phones if they're in some kind of recovery program, because typically the telephone use is not allowed in the classroom settings. So they'll get permission to carry their phone all day, and that phone call will never come. But it still seems to be a little bit faster, the old-fashioned in-person way. So that's kind of what I've been recommending, just so that, because many of their halfway houses, that there is a lot of food sharing, Cynthia, yes, but there's just not enough food to go around necessarily for all the new guys. I typically work with only men who were involved in the justice system, and I've tried to supplement by setting up some commodities to be delivered to two of the halfway houses that I work with that seem to have the highest food security issues. But even then, it's not enough,
Yeah. You first of all, what county are you in?
I'm in Knox County.
Knox County. Okay. And you said that the office is close to your building.
Yeah, the DHS office is within walking distance of my particular office. I work for CAC.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's great. We love CAC.
I do
You
too.
guys are awesome. Write that down. Yeah, that's wonderful that it's that close. And I also wanted to point out that on the One DHS portal, there is actually an option to submit an application without having to have an account. It's just kind of lower down on the page. I don't know if you knew that or not. I don't know if that's helpful or not. But if what you're doing is working, then keep it up. But yeah, thanks, Susan. I really appreciate that insight.
Thank you.
And does anybody else have any other questions or comments for Cynthia before we move on? Just want to hold a little space.
Let me say just one last thing.
Yeah.
One of our case managers has really established a good relationship with a couple of the SNAP investigators. And so we tend to fax our applications directly to those people rather than getting lost in the system. That seems to have worked best for us. We did used to send people over to the SNAP office, and of course, when the office is shut down here, that stopped, and we haven't started that again. But Susan, we might have to try that.
That's a really good point. And yes, having somebody, having a connection at DHS is a very useful thing to do. It's not always that feasible for most people. To that point, I want to mention what Sherry Brown said in the chat about having a dedicated DHS person coming out to physical locations to do things. I have heard of a couple. They used to do this a lot. I have heard of one or two people that we were connected to who do have caseworkers and representatives come out regularly and do the whole process in person. I don't know exactly what the process is to get that done. We're looking into that. I do know that they need certain infrastructure like a hard landline and encryption data and stuff like that. So if we learn more about how that process works, maybe we could share. But thank you so much, Cynthia. We really appreciate your insight. It's super helpful to know what this is like kind of on the ground doing the work. So thanks
Yeah.
for joining us.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our advocacy and action section, so we can figure out some ways to advocate for these issues. So for administrative advocacy, this is essentially administrative advocacy is things that the administration themselves can do without having to involve the legislature. And a few things that we can do here are time limit area waivers can exempt entire geographic locations. And this can kind of reduce the need for, reduce the issues caused by unemployment and underemployment. Essentially, the way this works is that the state can apply for a waiver for time limits or work requirements that covers an entire geographic area, normally counties. We had a lot of these. Most of the state was covered a few years ago, and they've just kind of decreased over the years. So we would love to see this get back to a robust level. Obviously, repealing the drug felony ban is a huge thing that we would love to see. As I said earlier, the state is able to simply repeal the ban instead of the modified ban that we have now. So these are both things that we could do to urge DHS to do. Some other ones are adopting what's called telephonic signature. This is a mechanism where a person could complete an application over the phone, and including signing it. Because there are a lot of states that do this. We actually currently don't do this, but this would break a lot of the barriers, such as not having an email address or things like that. Longer recertification periods. So currently, just a normal SNAP case, every 6 months you have to recertify. Often this means having documents and doing another interview. If we were to lengthen the amount of time between those periods, it creates less of an administrative burden, but also it creates also a burden for the participant and the agency that may be helping them. The less administrative issues you have to deal with, the longer you can be on the program, the better off you're going to be. And then the third one here is broad-based categorical eligibility. This is a much bigger policy than just SNAP. It also affects other programs. Essentially, this is the way to address what's called the benefits cliff. So basically what happens is if a person gets, let's say, a 50-cent raise per hour, that raise, could increase their income for the month just over the limit to where they're eligible, which can make them lose all of their SNAP benefits or any or the other programs that this applies to, resulting in a net loss of resources, which of course is not great. This is why we call it the benefits cliff. Broad-based categorical eligibility would introduce kind of a graduated stepping stone process for this, so that you don't just lose all of your benefits at once. The state could opt into this, and we would love to see them do that. Next, we're going to talk about some federal legislation. Currently, Tennessee is not in session, so there's no real bills to talk about there. We will be keeping an eye on that when they get back in session, so look forward to some updates. Sorry, Signe, quick correction. Repealing the SNAP drug felony ban does require legislation. Okay, sorry about that. Good point, thank you. Yeah, so federal legislation. So several of these are part of the Farm Bill. If you're not familiar with the Farm Bill is a large, what's called an omnibus piece of legislation that is reauthorized every 5 years. It covers things like agriculture, conservation efforts, and notably, it is where the SNAP program comes from. So every 5 years, Congress people have the option to throw in bills that would affect the program in different ways. So Representative Steve Cohen of Memphis, shout out, this would remove the lifetime ban for people with drug felonies just across the board. And it would also codify the pre-release waiver that we have in place nationally. So it would allow all people in every state to start the process 30 days before. So this is a great bill we would love to see. Maxine Waters of California has introduced, this is not part of the Farm Bill, but this Ending Homelessness Act that would really bolster the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This is a great way to make sure that needs are met. As we said earlier, meeting basic needs helps meet other basic needs. So people who are, unhoused because they exit prison, this would really serve them. Another Farm Bill legislation we would love to see is the Hot Foods Act by Representative Grace Ming. This would essentially allow SNAP dollars to be sent on hot prepared foods. Currently, this is not allowed. For people who have the inability to store, cook, and eat food in a space, people may be living in a space that doesn't have access to a fridge or a stove. This would allow them to spend their SNAP dollars to still provide themselves with nutrition without having access to those things. So the next one we have on here is this one, the Improving Access to Nutrition Act. This is Representative Barbara Lee of California. This is also a Farm Bill, and this would essentially get rid of the time limits. So as we said earlier, there's a 3-month time limit for people who are not meeting work requirements. This would remove that rule from the CFR altogether. So what can you do about it? Well, advocacy is a great option, and if you are with an agency or some sort of reason you can't do advocacy professionally, you can always do this on your off time when you're clocked out. This involves things like contacting your legislators via phone, letter, or email, letting them know that you want them to support these bills and any other legislation or policies that make it easier for people, especially justice impacted people, to get on and stay on these programs in order to meet their needs. Phone, letter, email are all good. If you're a person like me who does not like talking on the phone, you can always call after hours and leave a voicemail. Those still count. And so I've linked here federal and state legislator finders. You just put your address in and it will pop up a screen with exactly who represents you on there. We also have a number of working groups. We obviously do these monthly webinars on various topics, but we also have a number of working groups we do every month or every quarter, focus on specific program areas. So if you're interested in any of these program areas, we invite you to sign up for them. The only one that's not monthly is the College Hunger Quarterly Call. That next one is in September. Another option is Nutrition Note, which is our monthly anti-hunger newsletter. It goes out usually on the second Wednesday of every month. It will have information about these events, different things that we gather over the month, etc. And then, closing out soon, these are a bunch of resources we think are really good. All of the resources we use to put this together are here, as well as a lot of the fact sheets about these programs and things that we've put together simply for the purposes of knowledge proliferation. So you'll get these in the follow-up slides as well. And I guess at this point, I want to say, I know we're very close to ending, but I want to save a little time for people to ask questions generally or comment on what they've seen. So feel free to come off with me or raise your hand or put it in the chat. Okay, well, if nobody has any questions or comments, I appreciate you all. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Apparently don't know how to raise my hand. I just wanted to let everybody know about us. There are 3 of us on the call that work with Tennessee and Tennessee State University County Extension programs. And we work with folks to help them stretch their food dollars. We offer a series of classes to people who are either SNAP or SNAP eligible. And we help them learn to plan meals, to create a food budget. We talk about how to navigate the grocery store. We provide a lot of quick, easy recipes. They get a certificate of completion. They get some kitchen utensils. And Brittany Satinover and I work with the Department of Corrections day reporting centers. And that's what we do is we go in and we talk with them to help them to use the resources that they have. And so the information today has been really helpful to help me understand how I can better help them. But everybody has a county extension office. And if you are interested in having this type of programming offered to the folks in your county, we have some super people all over the state, and we would be happy to, offer our services.
Thank you so much, Janice. And I'll just ask real quick, is it okay if I send your information out in the follow-up email?
Absolutely. And Ann
Perfect.
Olson is over one of our other programs. And so there are three of us that are happy to do what we can.
Wonderful. Fantastic. So I will send your information out when I send the follow-up email. Does anybody else have any questions, comments, anything like that?
Chris, I can piggyback off of Janice. We worked with TSU and UT Extension on applying for a GusNIP grant to bring
Yeah.
SNAP doubling benefits across the state. There is currently a website that shows all locations that do offer SNAP doubling. Currently, a lot of that is funded by the Department of Health. And so just pointing to that. And then we just completed a community food security assessment, and we did do 2 participatory research projects with formerly or justice involved population. And I think an interesting topic that came up for us as it relates to even trying to navigate all of this is just the mental health impact of being incarcerated in the food system. And so learning a lot about hoarding food, or even trying to coexist with people where you buy food and then you have to share it in a space. It's just such a complicated situation for people when they're coming out. And so when I get the links to that Esri Data Hub, Chris, I'll share that with you too, because it just might be helpful for folks on this call to have an idea of some of those other things that might make something like an application,
Yes,
challenging.
absolutely. That's very helpful. Thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate that. And if you're able to, would you also send me the link to the SNAP doubling program website? I would love to share that as well. Yeah, so if nobody has anything else, we will go ahead and wrap up. I know we're getting close to time, so thank you all so much for joining us today. This is our contact information. Again, you will receive these slides, so you'll have this with you, but feel free to reach out to any of us for any of the things that we work with. And we are happy to offer policy guidance or lift up any issues you're having. Thank you so much. All right, and I'm going to stick around on the call for just a few minutes, and if anybody wants to stick around and ask questions, you talk. But thank y'all so much.